Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into something old, unsettling, and strangely personal, because it might be looking back at you. Picture this. You're standing in a muddy path between thatched cottages, the air thick with wood smoke and sheep stink. Chickens dart past your feet. Someone's churning butter with unsettling force. But the real weight, the thing pressing against your spine, isn't the smell or the cold. It's the feeling that someone's watching, not just watching, staring. You glance over your shoulder. A hunched figure pulls her shawl closer. A toddler cries the moment she sees you. No one's making eye contact now. Why? Because here in this 14th century village, a stray look might crack your luck like an old pot. You probably won't survive this. Honestly, not with that mole on your cheek and the way your left eye twitches when you're nervous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it over there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The thatch above your head sags with age. Rain's been steady for 3 days, and you've spent most of it hunched near the fire, listening. They whisper about Madge's goat, how it stopped giving milk the very morning old Tom glared at it. About the newborn who won't sleep since the baker's daughter complimented his bright eyes. You think it's ridiculous until you step outside and notice the butter churn has gone still, not a drop since noon. The cow stands in the field, healthy but sullen, and you remember locking eyes with a passing traveler earlier, blue eyes, unblinking, too long. The evil eye, they say, can come from envy, anger, even admiration. It's not about intent, it's about energy. You could curse someone just by noticing them too hard. Historians still argue whether belief in the eye originated as a genuine metaphysical fear or a social control tactic, a way to keep folks modest and eyes averted. Either way, it worked. You see it in your neighbors. No one's ever too proud. Compliments are followed by quick counter charms. May God protect him, or let it not be the eye. Your friend Ewan once admired your wife's new headscarf. The next day, his foot swelled up like a rotten melon. Coincidence? Sure, but try convincing Ewan of that now. You begin to notice the tiny rituals, the way people spit just a little after praising a child, the way women tie red ribbons to cribs and hang garlic above the door. It's not just protection, it's habit, a rhythm of survival, like checking the hearth for embers or the sky for storms. Back inside, the old woman by the fire tells you a story. Her voice is dry as oats, but it clings to your ears. There was a man, she says, born with 2 pupils in one eye. Couldn't go to mass without the chickens going silent and babies weeping. She leans in. He looked at a barley field once, just looked, and the next day it was crawling with mice. You nod politely, as if you believe her. But that night, when your candle flickers and goes out, you feel the air thicken, like something unseen is watching from the rafters. You wrap yourself tighter in your blanket, trying not to blink too fast. The next morning, you're greeted not with sunlight, but with suspicion. The neighbor's dog barked all night. 2 hens have vanished, and you, wide-eyed newcomer, are looking awfully rested for someone under a curse. You try to shake it off, but then you notice a smear of something greasy on your threshold, a protective oil, a warning. You ask around, but no one admits to leaving it, and no one looks you in the eye. Here, superstition isn't fringe, it's infrastructure. The church may preach faith in divine protection, but even the priest carries an amulet beneath his robe. You've seen him clutch it during storms. And speaking of storms, remember that traveler, the one with the blue eyes. A week later, a hailstorm flattens half the crops. No one saw him leave. Some say he turned into mist. That's the thing about the evil eye. It never quite stands still. It's in the sudden illness, the spoiled cream, the cough that won't quit. It hides behind things, coincidences, bad luck, natural decay. But in a world where medicine is bleeding and sanitation is whatever lives in the stream behind your house, a curse feels safer than randomness. At least you can fight a curse. You join the villagers at the edge of the woods one evening. They're burying something in a cloth. Herbs, bones, a feather, maybe a prayer. Just in case, someone murmurs. You nod, and yet part of you, modern, rational you, still wonders. How did this belief persist across so many places and centuries? Historians still argue whether the evil eye was a spontaneous shared superstition or a cultural contagion carried along trade routes. Mesopotamians feared it, so did Greeks, Romans, Persians. It traveled across deserts, crossed oceans, took root in villages just like this one. And here, among wet fields and flickering candles, you realize something. Even if the evil eye isn't real, its power is real enough to shape lives, behaviors, fears. That night, you hang a shard of glass above your bed, just in case. And when the wind howls through the shutters, you dream of unblinking eyes in the dark. You wake to the sound of wood splitting somewhere outside, an axe maybe, or a door not quite cooperating with its hinges. It's still dim, early morning, the kind of gray light that makes everything in the room feel just a little haunted. You swing your feet down onto a packed dirt floor, listening for movement. A rooster croaks instead of crows. Comforting. Last night's dreams are fuzzy but leave a residue, like smoke clinging to your tunic. There were eyes in them, blue eyes, impossibly bright, floating over a cradle, over a fire, over your own sleeping form. You blink the images away and step outside, into the chilly mist of the village. A child runs past you, shrieking not from play but from fright. She hides behind her mother's skirts and peeks at you with wide, suspicious eyes. You follow her gaze and see it, a baby, no more than a few weeks old, cradled in an older woman's arms. But the baby's eyes are blue, shockingly so. You wouldn't think twice about that today. But here, in this village, blue eyes are rare and feared. They carry an unnatural weight. People associate them with the evil eye, and suddenly you understand the tightness in the crowd's posture. They don't say anything. They don't have to. The baby is lovely and therefore dangerous. In medieval folklore, blue eyes had a complicated relationship with suspicion. While beauty was often praised, it was also watched closely, because beauty drew attention, and attention drew envy. And envy, as we now know, was the true fuel of the evil eye. You watch as the baby's mother wraps her shawl tighter, shielding her infant from the curious, nervous glances around her. Someone murmurs a prayer. Another drops a tiny pouch of rosemary and ash at the family's doorstep. Protection or warning, you're not sure. The fear of certain eye colors wasn't just about rarity. It tied deeply into a belief that the eye's power was visual, literal, and possibly physiological. In some traditions, the idea was that certain people emitted harmful rays from their eyes. Think X-Men, but with peasant anxiety instead of laser beams. Historians still argue whether this belief arose from early medical misunderstandings or symbolic storytelling. Either way, that baby's cerulean peepers might as well be fireballs to these villagers. There's a particular nervousness around children. You notice, they're seen as fragile, easily swayed by forces adults can resist. A stranger's gaze, even a friendly one, could supposedly cause night terrors, fevers, colic, or worse. Mothers learn quickly to cover their babies' faces in public, not out of modesty, but defense. Some even draw tiny black dots on the infant's forehead or cheek. These, you're told, act as decoys. The evil eye, easily distracted, might hit the dot instead of the soul behind it. You pass a home where an infant is said to have cried for 3 nights straight. The mother looks worn and hollow-eyed. She recounts how a traveling monk praised the baby's strength. That night, she whispers, he screamed and screamed, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. She placed a mirror at the foot of the cradle. She burned time. She spit 3 times and hung iron scissors above the door. Nothing helped until the child was bathed in water from 7 different wells. You try not to laugh, but your foot lands wrong on the stones, and you twist your ankle with an undignified grunt. A stable boy glances up from feeding the goats and raises a brow. "Looked too long at the baby, didn't you?" he says, not unkindly. You limp on, noticing now how many charms are tucked into doorframes, twisted twine, carved wood, feathers, bits of shell. One woman has a tiny eye painted above her window, meant to reflect the evil eye back on itself, like an ocular boomerang. Clever, possibly paranoid. And then there's Marjorie. Every village has one, sharp-tongued, keen-eyed, the type who notices things. Her eyesight is failing, one eye slightly cloudy, the other startlingly bright. Children cross themselves when she approaches, not because she's a witch, well, maybe a little, but because of that gaze. She looks through you. She claims she once killed a flea just by glaring at it. Probably a joke. You hope it's a joke. You sit with her by the bakehouse, and she explains her version of the eye. "It's not evil on purpose," she croaks. "It's just hungry, wants to take. Jealous things always do. That's why it strikes the pretty and the lucky and the well-fed. And in that moment, you realize the most disturbing part of the evil eye isn't that it's malicious. It's that it's automatic. You could curse someone just by admiring their good fortune. The eye, according to Marjorie, is like gravity. It pulls without thinking. So everyone trains themselves not to look too long. Compliments are carefully worded. If someone says, "What a strong lad," they quickly follow with, "God keep him," or "knock on wood," or "spit, always spit," a fine mist of defense. You begin practicing these habits yourself. Better safe than sorry. Compliment with caution. Praise, then pivot. Offer a sprig of ash before saying anything nice about someone's garden. There's even etiquette for babies. If you absolutely must admire one, say something deliberately ugly first, "ugly little thing," and then slip in your praise under your breath, wrapped in counter charms. This way, the evil eye gets confused, loses focus, forgets its target. One fringe story you overhear in the tavern is particularly absurd. A man swore his newborn was cursed by a reflection, not a person, just a baby seeing its own eyes in a bowl of water. "It cried for days," he moans. "We had to give it beer to quiet it," which, to be fair, probably would work, though not exactly pediatric advice. Still, that fear of the innocent being hurt by attention feels oddly modern. Even today, you avoid posting a perfect moment online without a talisman emoji or two. Maybe not much has changed. As the day winds down, you see that blue-eyed baby again, swaddled and sleeping. Her mother doesn't look up, but you nod anyway, a tiny nod, careful, respectful, just enough to be polite, but not enough to curse anything. By the next morning, the sky is barely more than a tired smear of silver when you step out into the village square again. Someone's hung rosemary bundles across their doorway overnight. Another has painted a crude, wide-open eye on their front step in chalk, its iris disturbingly large, as though daring anything supernatural to try its luck. You pass through these signs with cautious respect, giving them a wide berth like they're sleeping animals that might bite. The villagers are waking slowly, rubbing their eyes and checking the world for cracks. The evil eye, it seems, does most of its damage under the surface, like mold in the beams of a house or ill wishes tucked in smiles. You make your way toward the chapel, drawn by the bells, not church bells, though smaller ones, fastened to a young boy's tunic. He's running in circles, his laughter quick and breathless, and those little bells jingle with every movement. "To confuse the eye," someone says beside you. You nod like you already knew, though, of course, you didn't. Bells, mirrors, knots, pins, herbs, so many strategies for protection, like a superstition starter pack. And most fascinatingly, they layer them. A baby might wear a clove of garlic in a pouch, a tiny silver bell on their wrist, and have a smear of soot on their cheek, all at once. Just in case one charm fails, the others might kick in like backup parachutes. You get curious. What's the logic behind it all? You find a bench near the chapel garden, where an old deacon with the temperament of wet wool is brushing dust from a pew. You ask him about these amulets. With a sigh that sounds older than the stained glass, he says, "Some folk trust God, others trust string and pepper." A pause. Can't blame them. The devil's got eyes too. There's an argument among scholars, surprise, surprise, about whether the church encouraged or tolerated these folk remedies. Historians still debate whether ecclesiastical tolerance for anti-evil eye practices was genuine spiritual leniency, or just an exhausted shrug from priests overwhelmed by the daily chaos of medieval life? Officially, yes. Relying on charms was frowned upon. But when your cow suddenly won't give milk or your child won't wake, you don't wait for canon law to catch up. You reach for the nearest clove of garlic and hope. Garlic, by the way, gets around. In some villages, people believe it can see. They hang it near cradles like a watchman. In others, they say it wards off envy because it smells so bad. The eye won't come near. Honestly, that one kind of tracks. Then there's salt. It purifies, protects, and tastes great on boiled turnips. Triple threat. Some mothers rub a pinch into their babies' feet at night, whispering blessings with each motion. Others sprinkle it across door thresholds in a slow, murmured ritual you're careful not to interrupt. When in doubt, don't cross a line of salt unless you're invited. Not all these methods are homemade, though. There's a brisk little side economy around protective charms. The local blacksmith offers iron rings, blessed to blind the eye. The herb woman sells fennel garlands, each strand twisted while reciting psalms backward. One traveling peddler swears by a shiny blue bead imported from the east, round, glossy, with a dark pupil-like center. Keeps the bad gaze out, he insists, grinning with too many teeth. It's oddly beautiful. People hang them from eaves and carts, almost proud of their precautions. You notice that many of these charms share one peculiar trait. They reflect mirrors, beads, polished stones, even metal discs, as if the best way to beat the evil eye is to turn it on itself, like teasing a cat with its own shadow. You pass a house where the families painted hundreds of tiny concentric circles around their windows, black ink on whitewash, dizzying spirals that pull your vision in, like optical traps. It makes the eye forget where it's going, someone whispers, gets lost, and there's something fascinating about that, isn't there? That the evil eye isn't unstoppable. It's powerful, yes, but distractible, gullible. You can trick it, lure it, mislead it like a toddler chasing fireflies, almost comforting if you squint at it right. Still, the burden of this belief falls hardest on the vulnerable. You watch as a girl no older than 8 carefully ties knots into a red thread, eyes narrowed in concentration. Each knot is a wish, or a block, or maybe both. She wears it like a bracelet once she's done, tucking the end under her sleeve with the solemnity of a ritual learned too early. You find it hard not to feel something between awe and sadness. These aren't grown-up games. These are real defenses in a world where misfortune feels like a predator sniffing at the door. And they're not all cute. A merchant swears he once buried a toad under his front step, alive. To drink the curse, he says grimly. It bloated and died within days, but my wife stopped coughing. That night, you check your boots before stepping into the dark, just in case a frog wants revenge. Even stranger are the regional oddities. In some places, a raw egg rolled over the body is thought to absorb the curse. In others, women chant the names of saints while spinning wool counterclockwise. There's even a tale about a village that once sacrificed a rooster every harvest to keep their fields from wilting under a jealous glance. Barbaric? Maybe. But their cabbages were enormous. Not all beliefs are so physical. Some are verbal, prayers, curses, nonsense rhymes muttered under the breath. One you overhear goes something like, back to sender, sevenfold, through the window, through the cold. It's nonsense poetry with sharp teeth. And sometimes, you're told, the best protection is secrecy. Keep good news quiet. Don't show off. Don't boast about your luck or flaunt your harvest. Keep your mouth shut and your blessings buried. It's less, live your truth, and more, hide your fortune or get hexed. The wind picks up as dusk approaches, carrying with it the scent of bread, sweat, and lavender. You watch villages close shutters, blow out lamps, and light protective herbs in little clay dishes. The smoke curls lazily, soft and thick. You breathe it in and wonder if it's working on you, too. As you pass the smithy, a glint catches your eye. A nail, long and twisted, hammered into a post at a crooked angle. That one's not for building, the blacksmith mutters without looking up. That's an eye nail. Keeps it out. You don't ask how he knows it works. He doesn't strike you as someone who relies on explanations. That night, you sleep with a clove of garlic under your pillow, just in case. You wake with the tang of garlic still clinging to your breath, even though you didn't actually eat any. It's just there, like the lingering memory of something that protected you while you slept. Your pillow's slightly damp where the garlic clove pressed in, and your dreams, though fuzzy, were mercifully uneventful. No withering glances, no eyes in the darkness. Stepping outside, you're met with a sky the color of cool ash, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster is expressing its full existential dread. You follow the sound of sweeping, someone brushing the threshold of their home with what looks like a broom made of dried thistles. It's a rhythmic back and forth, almost meditative. You ask about it. To sweep away misfortune, the woman says, never stopping. It clings to the corners. You nod. Seems fair. Misfortune seems like the kind of guest who'd hide under the furniture. You begin to notice these patterns in daily life. Subtle movements, routines, muttered phrases. There's a man at the well who always turns the bucket clockwise 3 times before pulling. A weaver who knots her thread in silence before the first stitch. A baker who makes a tiny secret roll just for the saints and burns it intentionally. Not offering it, mind you, burning it, as if to say, here, this is yours. Please don't take anything else. You start to realize that medieval people didn't just react to the evil eye. They lived with it, like mold in a house or a bad knee in winter. It's just part of life. Their rituals aren't frantic. They're routine. They've been passed down like recipes. No one questions why you rub soot on a baby's forehead. You just do, because not doing it feels like daring something you can't see. And yet there's also performance in it, subtle but present. You meet a midwife, sharp-eyed, barefooted, with silver rings on every knuckle, who speaks of dramatizing the counter-curse. She tells you, if someone's casting the eye with drama, with force, then your protection needs to be louder. It's not just magic. It's theater. She grins at your raised eyebrow. You ever seen a grown man shout blessings at a goat like it's possessed? The goat doesn't care, but the eye does. There's a logic to it, in a twisted sort of way. If envy is emotional, if it's fed by strong feelings, then the counter spell must be equally potent. So, people act. They shout blessings into the wind. They sprinkle water like it's holy even when it's from a leaky bucket. They break plates, not because they're clumsy, but because a shattered object can absorb a curse and spare the living. It all starts to click. Medieval life was about managing attention. Stay modest, be quiet when praised, don't tempt fate, don't flash your fortune. If someone compliments your baby, spit, yes really, mothers spit lightly on their own children's foreheads, not because they're rude, because it muddies the beauty. It's like saying, don't worry, evil eye, this one's not perfect, not worth your gaze. You pass a child with a string of amber beads and a dab of charcoal under her left eye. Her mother shrugs. She's too lovely, makes people look too hard. You think of Instagram filters, of curated profiles and subtle flexes, not so different, really. Just now we're trying to attract the eye. Back then, they spent their lives trying to avoid it. Of course, not everyone agrees on the best methods. There are heated debates, some muttered over fences, others hollered in taverns, about which counter-charms actually work. Some insist the protective bead must be blue, others say red is better. A heated argument breaks out between two women over whether rosemary should be hung upside down or right side up to deflect a curse. One insists it needs to be blessed by a widow. The other rolls her eyes. It just needs to be old, like my mother-in-law. Historians still argue whether the widespread variation in these folk practices reflected cultural diffusion from ancient pagan rites, or just good old-fashioned rural creativity. Did people really inherit these techniques from Roman rituals and Mesopotamian priests, or did they just make stuff up on the fly whenever a chicken laid an egg sideways? It's impossible to say, and maybe it doesn't matter, because real or not, these protections feel real to the people using them. That's what you come to understand. The evil eye isn't always a belief in one single monster. It's a vocabulary, a language people use to explain why things go wrong. A baby falls ill after a stranger compliments their curls. That's the eye. A cow dries up after a neighbor stares too long at your full pails. The eye again. You get a sudden rash after winning a bet. Eye. Always the eye. And so they fight back, not with swords, but with salt, silver, and spit. Some even go further. You meet a man with a collection of tiny wax dolls, each with a mirror embedded in the chest. He places one on his windowsill each day. When asked why, he simply says, so it sees itself, that's punishment enough. And there's an entire secondary belief system devoted to bouncing the curse back to its sender. These are not quiet, humble protections. These are the magical equivalents of slapping someone's hand mid-reach. You hear stories about people who carry special beads engraved with eyes, not to defend against the evil eye, but to offend it right back, as if to say, you want to curse me? Good luck. My necklace has better vision than you. These beads are called counter eyes, and they are often paired with charms shaped like hands, horns, or even phallic symbols. Subtle, not really. But the logic goes that shocking the eye, embarrassing it, might break its power. You remember this as you pass a mason chiseling a grotesque face into the lintel of a new home. The face is exaggerated, tongue out, eyes crossed, teeth bared in a crude grin. "It's to mock the eye," he says. "Make it feel foolish. Laughter is armor." You can't help but smile. A few hours later, you're inside a smoky tavern, where the beer tastes like damp bread and the stew tastes like surrender. An old woman leans toward you, eyes sharp. She tells you of the eye that isn't cast by envy, but by love. "Too much affection spoils the spirit," she says. "The eye doesn't care why you look, just that you look too much." This is where the folklore gets messy. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's admiration gone toxic. You stare into your bowl, thinking about how much of life is spent seeking attention, praise, validation, applause. But here, in this dim corner of the world, attention is dangerous. Love can sour, joy can bruise. Too many blessings invite a backlash. So they salt their happiness. They wear it quietly. That night, as you return to your bed, you catch your reflection in the basin water. For a moment, just a flicker, you wonder if your own gaze is too heavy, if you've looked too long at someone's luck, if you've carried envy, even silently. You blow out the candle and whisper a charm you half remember from the weaver earlier, just in case. The morning greets you not with a rooster's call this time, but with the chime of a church bell, low, resonant, and a bit off-key, like even the heavens are sleepy today. You stretch under the scratchy wool blanket and feel the faint ache in your neck from a pillow that seems to have lost its purpose sometime in the 13th century, but you're getting used to it. There's a certain charm in discomfort until your feet hit the cold floorboards, and then the charm vanishes like mist. Today, you find yourself trailing a local friar, an energetic man who smells vaguely of incense and wet parchment. He walks fast for someone who seems like he shouldn't. His sandals flap against the muddy path as he moves between houses, muttering blessings and nodding solemnly at those who ask for them. He's what you might call a roving spiritual consultant, though no one uses that term. His job, among other things, is to counter curses. And let's be honest, you've followed weirder people. You learn quickly that religious figures in medieval Europe weren't just preachers. They were interpreters of misfortune, linguists of the unseen. That limp your neighbor developed overnight, possibly the eye, that sudden rash on your cow, almost certainly demonic influence, unless the cow was recently praised, in which case, I. You'd think this would be the domain of village witches and herbalists. But here's the twist. Christian clergy didn't dismiss the evil eye. Not entirely. In fact, in many regions, they leaned right into it. They just rebranded it. The gaze wasn't a folk curse. It was a demonic tool, a test, a weapon of Satan, aimed at the faithful. Envy is one of the 7 deadlies, the friar says, squinting into the distance as if envy might leap out from the hedgerow. And the eye is envy made visible. It's an elegant theological pivot. The eye wasn't just superstition. It was proof of sin. It fit neatly into the moral framework. And because the church controlled morality, it also claimed jurisdiction over the eye. So, blessings and holy water became the new armor. Charms were discouraged unless they involved saints. You could no longer hang an iron knife above your doorway, but you could hang a relic of Saint Benedict. You couldn't mutter your grandmother's protection spell, but you could recite Psalm 121 with a bit of theatrical fear in your voice. Historians still argue whether this blending of folk magic and formal religion was a sign of syncretism or just ecclesiastical marketing genius. Either way, it worked. People started slipping crosses into their pockets where they once carried pebbles or bones. Protective amulets were rebranded as devotional items. Sometimes the same object, just now with a halo. You visit a small chapel nestled in a valley, its walls warped by time and weather. Inside, above the doorway, hangs a strange wooden carving, a single open eye, staring straight out at you, not threatening, more like watchful. The friar explains it's the all-seeing eye of God, supposedly a deterrent, because, as he puts it, no eye can challenge the Lord's gaze. You ask him gently if that isn't just another version of the evil eye. He frowns for a second, then shrugs. The difference, he says, is intention. One watches to protect, the other watches to harm. Fair enough, but not everyone buys the sanitized version. You hear whispers about communities that still hold on to their old ways, quietly, behind closed doors. They carve hidden symbols on their lintels. They bury frog bones at crossroads. They keep one room in the house that no one is ever allowed to sleep in, just in case a curse needs a place to rest. One story, told to you by a nervous monk with too much mead in his cup, involves a rural church where the statue of the Virgin was found facing away from the congregation. No one had turned it. It simply moved. The villagers believed she was shielding herself from a powerful eye cast by a jealous widow in the front pew. The statue was quietly removed the next day. The widow left shortly after. No one talked about it again. You learn quickly that curses and counter-curses didn't respect theological borders. They crept into the cracks of scripture and nestled in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. You find one such manuscript in a scriptorium, where monks copy by candlelight, squinting under the weight of 1,000 hours. In the corner of one page is a tiny doodle, a monk holding up 2 fingers in a gesture of blessing, while a demon recoils. It's funny and deliberate, a visual charm, because, as it turns out, even the scribes believed that copying certain texts made you vulnerable to the eye, especially texts about suffering, especially if you were tired or proud, or if your ink ran too smoothly, because that might mean you're doing too well. So they'd pause, say a blessing, smudge the corner intentionally, insert an error, just one, a tiny sacrifice to humility. You walk through a graveyard later that afternoon, and you notice something strange. Some of the headstones are intentionally plain, no carving, no names. A few are even covered with rubble or moss, not because no one remembers them, but because too much attention might invite, well, you know. Death wasn't safe from the eye either. Even in burial, people sought to avoid posthumous envy. He died too peacefully, someone might say, and that was enough to draw suspicion. So the mourners wept loudly, overacted their grief. One man even pretended to faint at his cousin's funeral, just in case someone thought he wasn't sad enough. You can't help but laugh. You think about how people today still do this, dressing modestly after success, pretending to be tired when they're not, avoiding eye contact when they're proud. The performance is different, but the instinct is the same. Don't shine too bright. Don't tempt the glance. By evening, you've circled back to the friar, who's sitting by the fire with a bowl of something that smells like hope and onion. He tells you one last story before bed. There was a man who believed the eye had settled on his barn. He says, every calf was born sickly, every harvest thin, so he built a small tower, not to guard the barn, but to watch it. He sat there every day, staring, watching the barn, daring the eye to try something while he was looking. Did it work, you ask? No, the friar says, licking his spoon, but he stopped blaming other people, and sometimes that's all you need. As you settle in for sleep, you think about all the ways people try to feel in control of their bodies, their luck, their fears. The eye might be real or imagined, but the power it holds, that's always been real. And the stories people tell about it, those are the spells that truly matter. You dream of eyes in the walls, but this time they blink politely and then look away. You find yourself wandering down a narrow cobblestone street, the air thick with the smell of damp straw and roasted chestnuts. Around you, townsfolk go about their day, faces etched with weariness, but eyes sharp, always watching, always wary. You quickly realize this isn't just a town. It's a living tapestry of suspicion and superstition, woven tightly around the thread of the evil eye. You notice how everyone's posture is slightly guarded, how no one meets your gaze directly for too long. It's not rudeness, it's survival. They've been conditioned to guard their souls behind walls of caution. And then you see it, the painted symbol on a doorframe, a hand with an eye in the palm. It's crude but unmistakable, a protective amulet called the Hamsa, or Hand of Fatima, meant to ward off the evil eye. You've heard of it before, but never seen one in person. Turns out, the Hamza is ancient, traveling across cultures and centuries, from the deserts of North Africa to the hills of Europe. A symbol borrowed, adapted, and fiercely defended. People believe the eye in the hand watches for the evil eye, catching it before it can harm. But there's more than one version of this talisman. In some places, it's upside down. In others, it's adorned with fish scales or tiny bells. Each detail carries its own protective meaning, like an ancient password whispered from one generation to the next. You overhear a merchant boasting about the Nazar, a glass bead painted bright blue and white, rumored to reflect the evil eye back to its source. The color blue, he explains, mimics the sky and water, endless and watchful. Envy cannot pierce it. He lifts a string of these beads, letting the sunlight catch their glossy surface. You pocket one, partly out of curiosity, partly because, well, you never know. Walking further, you spot children playing with tiny charms, little eyes dangling from strings and bracelets, You wonder if the kids understand the weight these objects carry, or if, like children everywhere, they simply enjoy the shiny shapes and jingly sounds. Maybe the protective power lies in innocence, too. The night brings stories, quiet whispers in hearth-lit rooms about people cursed by strangers' stares. One woman recalls how her neighbor, jealous of her newborn's rosy cheeks, would cross the street to avoid looking directly, fearing she might unleash the eye. It's a complex dance, looking enough to show goodwill, but not enough to cause harm. Some villagers go to extremes, avoiding direct eye contact entirely. A man admits to you that he once wore a pair of mirrored glasses inside his home, convinced it would keep the evil eye at bay by reflecting it outward. You imagine him peering suspiciously at his own reflection and realize that sometimes paranoia and protection are tangled in a messy embrace. But there's also a shadowy side to the evil eye legend, a dark undercurrent of social control. Envy, after all, is a powerful emotion. Some scholars argue that the fear of the evil eye functioned as a tool to enforce humility and discourage boasting. After all, if people believe that success or beauty attracts a harmful gaze, then being modest isn't just polite, it's necessary for survival. You consider the implications. Was the evil eye a way to keep communities in check, to ensure no one stood too tall or shone too brightly? It's a fascinating theory, and one historians still debate. You pass a market stall selling herbs and charms, each carefully labeled: rue for protection, juniper for cleansing, wolf's bane for defense. The vendor tells you that some plants have cold eyes and others warm hearts, cryptic phrases that hint at which ailments or curses they can counteract. You watch as a woman buys a sprig of rosemary, promising to hang it above her doorway on St. John's Eve. It's a ritual of renewal, a time when the boundary between worlds thins, and the evil eye is said to be especially potent. You recall that medieval calendar was crowded with such liminal moments, times when protective magic was both most necessary and most effective. From midsummer fires to Candlemas candles, the year was marked by cycles of fear and hope, dark and light, gaze and counter-gaze. Later, you witness a curious scene, a man standing in a dusty square, performing an elaborate gesture. He waves his hands in complex patterns, murmuring words that sound like a mixture of Latin and something older, something raw. You ask a bystander what it means. Chasing away the evil eye, she replies. It's called the evil hand, a ritual dance to confuse the gaze and scatter its power. You're struck by the performative nature of this magic. The dance isn't just for the spirit world, it's for the community. A collective act of defiance against an invisible threat. In a way, it's medieval crowd control, but with more waving and less shouting. As you watch the man twirl and chant, you wonder if anyone else sees the irony, that people fight an unseen curse by drawing more attention to themselves. But maybe that's the point. To confront the eye, you have to be seen, loudly, proudly, unafraid. You drift back toward your lodging as dusk settles, the sky bleeding shades of violet and gold. You clutch your blue bead and run a finger over the tiny eye painted on it, thinking about how symbols travel and transform. In this world of shadows and glances, Perhaps it's the shared stories and rituals, the acts of communal belief that hold the greatest power of all. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow you'll be learning about the most infamous victim of the evil eye, whose tale still chills the bones of the village storytellers. But for now, the world is quiet, and you let yourself drift with the soft hum of a distant lute, feeling watched, but oddly comforted. You awake to a chill creeping through the cracks of your window, the sky above a pale gray canvas smeared with the promise of rain. Today, the village buzzes with hushed anticipation. Word has spread of a figure whose life was irrevocably marked by the evil eye, an individual whose story has been whispered in taverns, told at hearths, and turned into cautionary tales for generations. You're about to walk in their footsteps, tracing the shadows of a life haunted by envy and fear. The man's name is Geoffrey, a prosperous merchant known across the county for his fine linens and spices. His rise was rapid, his success the envy of many. But with prosperity came suspicion, and the persistent whisper that the evil eye had singled him out. You find yourself in his former home, now a crooked timbered building with sagging beams and windows shuttered tight. The walls seem to hold secrets, secrets heavy with dread and longing. Geoffrey's story begins as a warning, how quickly fortune can turn when the gaze of envy fixes upon you. His neighbors spoke of strange happenings, livestock falling ill without cause, his wife's complexion turning pale, and mysterious illnesses visiting his children. But the most disturbing were the sudden fires, small blazes that ignited in his storage rooms and extinguished just before spreading. You wonder how much was coincidence and how much was paranoia turned real. There's a surviving letter, penned by Geoffrey himself, begging for protection. It reads almost like a plea to the universe, an attempt to bargain with unseen forces. The letter asks for prayers, holy water, and anyone who might offer a charm or a blessing. You feel the weight of those words, a desperate grasp at hope in a world where the invisible often seems stronger than the tangible. One curious detail emerges from the archives. Geoffrey wore a particular amulet, shaped like a crescent moon. It was said to have been blessed by a traveling monk, and yet it offered no salvation. Was it ineffective, or did the curse simply overpower it? Historians still argue whether Geoffrey was truly cursed by the evil eye, or if his misfortunes were the product of economic jealousy and rumor. You can't help but notice how Geoffrey's tragedy feeds into a larger narrative, a tale repeated across time and space, where victims of the evil eye are both pitied and feared. The fear, you realize, isn't just of the curse, but of what the curse represents: social fractures, hidden animosities, the invisible tensions simmering beneath polite smiles. Later, you speak with a village elder who recalls a different interpretation. Geoffrey's real crime, she says, was being too proud. The eye punishes pride. He thought himself untouchable, but no one is. You nod, pondering how humility was not just a virtue, but a shield. You also uncover an odd fringe belief. Some villagers believed Geoffrey's downfall was the result of a counter-evil eye, a kind of spiritual insurance. They thought if you cast an evil eye back at someone who had one on you, you could break the cycle. Whether this worked or worsened matters is lost to history. but it's a reminder of how complex these beliefs became. You walk through the town square, imagining Jeffrey pacing the cobbles, eyes darting in every direction. You wonder if he ever paused to consider that maybe the eye was only as powerful as the fear it inspired. As dusk falls, you watch the village children play a game called Catch the Gaze, where one child tries to catch the eyes of others without being caught looking themselves. It's a strange, silent mimicry of the very superstition that shapes their lives. You smile softly. Maybe the evil eye is not just about curses and malice, but about the way people see each other, guarded, wary, but still connected. Tomorrow, you'll venture deeper into the darker rituals used to combat the evil eye, rituals that sometimes border on the terrifying. For now, you tuck the crescent-shaped amulet in your pocket and let the night embrace you, its shadows softened by the distant laughter of children. The morning air carries a hint of damp earth and burning wood, a smell that seems to seep into the very stones of the village. You step outside your lodging, senses alert to the unusual sights of this place where fear and faith dance a delicate waltz. Today, you will witness the rituals people performed to fight back the evil eye, strange ceremonies that seem part religion, part theater, and part desperate hope. First, you find yourself at the home of a midwife, a woman whose reputation for protecting newborns from the evil eye is as strong as the herbs she carries in her basket. She invites you inside her humble cottage, where bundles of dried lavender and garlic hang from the rafters, and a small fire flickers in the hearth. She explains that newborns are especially vulnerable to the evil eye because their innocence draws unwanted attention, and their fragile bodies cannot withstand spiritual harm. To protect them, she recites an ancient chant, her voice low and rhythmic, while sprinkling salt around the cradle in a protective circle. Salt, she says, is a purifier, a boundary that evil cannot cross. You notice how salt plays a role in so many cultures' defenses against malevolent forces, a simple mineral wielded like a weapon against the unseen. Next, she shows you a curious object, a bell made of bronze, engraved with tiny runes and suspended from a leather thong. This, she says, is a talisman of sound. The ringing disrupts the evil eye's focus, scattering its power like smoke in the wind. You test the bell yourself, the clear, bright peal echoing through the room. Sound as protection. It feels almost modern, like white noise drowning out the static of anxiety, but here, it's been used for centuries. As you leave, she cautions that rituals vary wildly across regions, influenced by local customs and beliefs. In some places, the evil eye is chased away by a loud clatter, people banging pots and pans or firing muskets. In others, it's soothed by the soft murmur of prayers or the gentle brush of feathers. You wander toward the village square, where preparations are underway for a communal ritual, an exorcism of sorts, designed to cleanse the entire community. A circle of villagers stand holding hands, faces solemn, as the village priest sprinkles holy water and recites verses in Latin. You notice a peculiar blend of Christian rites with older pagan customs. The priest's cross is adorned with sprigs of rosemary, an herb long associated with remembrance and protection. Historians still argue whether this syncretism was a strategic adaptation by the Church or a natural evolution of folk practice. Nearby, a group of women whisper about the evil hand, a series of gestures performed to deflect the evil eye. They demonstrate, curling their fingers in a symbolic shape, an ancient sign passed down through generations, a secret language of protection. You try the gesture yourself and wonder if the act is more psychological than mystical, a way to feel control in a world rife with uncertainty. You follow a procession to the edge of the village, where a bonfire crackles and spits sparks into the chilly air. The flames are meant to consume any lingering evil, a fiery purge that renews the community's spiritual armor. The villagers toss herbs and offerings into the fire, chanting as the smoke rises toward a cloudy sky. It's a spectacle both beautiful and eerie, the flames dancing like restless spirits. You overhear a theory that the evil eye's power is strongest during times of transition, birth, marriage, harvest, death, and that these rituals mark those thresholds. They serve as communal moments to confront fear and reaffirm bonds. As night falls, you retreat to a quiet corner and pull out a small book, worn and handwritten. Inside are notes on counter charms, objects worn or carried to confuse or reverse the evil eye's effects. One entry describes a necklace made from the teeth of a wolf, believed to intimidate the malevolent gaze with its fierce symbolism. You can't help but chuckle softly. Medieval folks had a flair for drama when it came to protection. Imagine explaining to a modern-day insurance agent that you're covered by a wolf's tooth necklace and a bell of sound. But the heart of it all is fear and hope intertwined, the oldest human cocktail. Tomorrow, you'll explore the stories behind these rituals and discover how sometimes the cure was almost as unsettling as the curse. For now, you let the sounds of the village fade to a quiet murmur, the flickering embers casting soft shadows that seem to nod knowingly as you close your eyes. The day dawns gray and misty, a perfect backdrop for the unsettling tales you're about to hear. You settle into a quiet corner of the village tavern, the low murmur of voices and the crackling hearth blending into a soft hum that lulls your mind into a gentle, curious state. Today, you'll listen closely to the whispered stories, those eerie anecdotes of people believed to have been struck down by the evil eye, their lives forever shadowed by a glance. One tale centers on a woman named Isolde, a seamstress renowned for her delicate handiwork and sharp tongue. The villagers say her skill bred envy as much as admiration. Late one winter, after a heated argument with a jealous rival, Isolde fell mysteriously ill. Her complexion paled, and her eyes darkened with fatigue no medicine could cure. The village healer shook her head, muttering that no herb or poultice could touch the curse of the evil eye. You lean in as an old man recounts how Isolde's illness worsened when she tried to leave the village. The legend says her rival's gaze followed her like a shadow, invisible but crushing, sapping her strength until she was forced to return, broken and isolated. Historians still argue whether such stories were genuine accounts of psychosomatic illness fueled by communal fear, or clever fabrications designed to police social behavior. Either way, the power of belief was unmistakable, sometimes stronger than any physical ailment. Then there's the tale of a child named Thomas, whose bright smile was said to provoke the envy of an older neighbor woman. According to village lore, the child began to waste away, his laughter fading to silence until the midwife's charms and protective rites were called in. One particularly quirky belief you discover involves the evil eye kiss, an ancient notion that a cursed individual could transfer their affliction through a single touch or kiss. To counter this, people sometimes kissed a red-hot iron or dipped their lips in salt water before greeting someone. You can almost imagine the awkward social moments. Mind if I kiss your cheek? Don't worry, I dipped my lips first. You notice how these stories reflect the human need to explain misfortune and enforce moral codes. The evil eye isn't just a curse. It's a mechanism to make sense of envy and its consequences, a reminder that jealousy can be as deadly as any weapon. You also overhear a scholar's debate about whether the evil eye functioned as an early form of social control, especially among women. In some communities, jealousy and accusations of casting the evil eye were ways to suppress rivalry and maintain order. It's a thorny subject, and one historians still argue about fiercely. You sip your ale, feeling a bit sorry for Isolde and Thomas, caught in a web of fear and superstition, but you also admire the resilience of those who fought back with prayers, charms, and community rituals. Later, you wander past the village cemetery, where weathered stones lean toward one another like tired sentinels. It's said that the evil eye's power lingers even after death, and families place special markers to protect their deceased loved ones from restless spirits jealous of their peace. You spot a small, roughly carved stone shaped like an eye, set atop a grave. Its simple form is haunting, a silent guardian watching over the restless. As dusk falls, you think about how stories, no matter how grim, bring people together. They give shape to fear and offer a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Tomorrow, you'll explore the symbolic imagery of the evil eye itself, from painted beads to mysterious hand signs, and how these symbols carried power beyond words. For now, the tavern's warmth wraps around you like a soft blanket, and the stories linger in your mind like fading echoes. You wake to a sky painted with soft pastels, the early light casting long shadows over the village streets. Today, your journey delves into the visual language of the evil eye, the symbols and signs designed not only to warn, but to ward off the curse itself. You stroll through the marketplace, your eyes catching the glint of beads, pendants, and amulets dangling from humble stalls. The evil eye symbol, often a vivid blue or green eye painted on glass or ceramic, is everywhere. You pick up one such talisman, its cobalt iris staring back at you with unnerving intensity. This Nazar bead, as it's called in many cultures, is said to absorb or deflect the harmful gaze, a physical shield against unseen malice. You learn that the color blue became associated with protection, partly because it was rare and costly to produce, lending the amulets an aura of value and power. And, intriguingly, some historians suggest the circular design of the eye mimics a watchful guardian, staring back at the evil eye with equal force. But the story of these symbols is far from straightforward. You discover countless variations, some with intricate patterns, others combining eyes with other motifs like fish scales or stars. In medieval Europe, these images often mixed with religious iconography, such as crosses or saints, blurring lines between superstition and faith. At a small chapel, you notice a fresco featuring a hand with an eye embedded in its palm, the Hamza, an ancient symbol thought to ward off evil. Its presence here shows how symbols traveled along trade routes, blending traditions and beliefs. You also witness villagers performing hand gestures believed to block or confuse the evil eye's power, curling the fingers or making a fist with the thumb tucked in. These signs were sometimes flashed quickly in moments of anxiety, a silent plea for protection. The most curious detail you uncover is a fringe belief about mirror amulets. Some thought that mirrors could trap or reflect the evil eye, bouncing the curse back to its source. This led to the odd practice of carrying small, polished metal discs or mirror shards, an early form of deflective tech, if you will. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of these symbols represented genuine belief, savvy commerce exploiting fear, or a bit of both. You notice how these talismans function socially as well. Wearing an evil eye amulet was a sign of belonging, a badge marking you as someone aware of the dangers lurking in envy's gaze. Later, you meet a craftsman who carves tiny eyes into wood and bone, each piece charged with a blessing whispered over it. He laughs softly. Maybe it's all nonsense, but at least it keeps the customers coming. You smile, thinking of Jeffrey's crescent amulet and the wolf's teeth necklace. Protective objects are as much about feeling safe as actually being safe. As night falls, you hang a small replica of the evil eye you purchased on your doorframe. The glass, catching the moonlight, whether it works or not, it's a comforting weight, a reminder that even in darkness, some light fights back. Tomorrow's story will take you into the curious world of curses and counter-curses, words and spells uttered to bind or break the evil eye's hold. For now, you let your thoughts drift with the shimmering gaze of those tiny glass eyes, watching over you as sleep beckons. The morning settles in quietly, a gentle haze blurring the edges of the village rooftops. Today, your exploration turns toward the spoken magic of medieval life, curses and counter-curses crafted to wield or deflect the evil eye's power. You imagine yourself in a dimly lit room where words, whispered or shouted, could shape fate as much as any blade. You find a local wise woman, a keeper of law, who agrees to share some of these incantations. Her voice is low, almost hypnotic, as she recites lines meant to bind the eye's venom or turn the gaze back upon the envious one. You notice the rhythm of her words, a steady, soothing cadence designed to calm as much as command. These curses often used vivid imagery, calling upon snakes to coil around the envious gaze, or likening the curse to a burning fire that consumes itself. Such poetic violence feels strangely like a medieval form of catharsis, but there were also lighter, almost humorous spells. One she recites asks for the evil eye's power to be replaced by 1,000 itching nettles, a petty revenge that probably made the victim squirm more than suffer. You chuckle softly, imagining the discomfort this curse might cause. Counter-curses, on the other hand, functioned like spiritual insurance policies. The wise woman shows you a simple phrase repeated while tracing a cross in the air. By this sign, be blocked and broken. She explains that combining Christian prayers with folk incantations was common, a pragmatic blend to cover all supernatural bases. You reflect on how this blending of faith and superstition reveals the medieval mind's complexity, never fully abandoning older beliefs, even as new religions took root. Historians still argue whether these verbal charms were originally pagan or Christian in origin, or a constantly shifting mix of both. You also learn of language charms, words or sounds believed to confuse the evil eye, making it lose focus. Some communities developed special anti-eye languages or gibberish phrases spoken only during rituals. This linguistic trickery fascinates you. It's like medieval programmers debugging their reality, using language as code to disrupt a cosmic virus. In the marketplace, you watch a traveling performer whose act includes mimicking curses and counter-curses, thrilling the crowd with his theatrical gestures and booming voice. You realize these spoken rituals serve not only spiritual needs, but also social and entertainment functions. Later, the wise woman shows you a curious object, a small bell attached to a thread. Ringing it while uttering a counter-curse was thought to scatter the evil eye's power, sound once again playing its protective role. You think back to the bronze bell from the midwife's cottage and smile at how sound weaves through these stories, a gentle but persistent weapon against darkness. As evening falls, you jot down some of the phrases, testing them silently, whether or not they carry true power. Their words feel like ancient lullabies, meant to soothe the restless heart. Tomorrow, you'll step into the shadowy world of objects believed to harbor or transfer the evil eye's curse. Jewelry, clothing, even food. For now, you let the wise woman's voice fade into the crackling of the hearth, her words a soft shield against the night. You rise into a sky streaked with pale gold, the soft rustling of leaves outside, whispering secrets as you prepare to explore an unsettling aspect of the evil eye, the idea that certain objects, even ordinary ones, could carry or transfer the curse. You wander through the village, eyes drawn to the glint of jewelry, the weave of cloth, and the humble bowls of food set out in doorways. The medieval mind was keenly aware that envy and malevolent gazes could be stored or transmitted through possessions. You overhear a conversation about a particular ring, an heirloom passed down generations, rumored to bring both luck and misfortune. People believed it could accumulate the gaze's venom, becoming a vessel of both power and peril. You learn about evil eye jewels, necklaces, bracelets, and rings fashioned to either attract the curse away from the wearer or, if mishandled, to trap the curse and amplify it. One local merchant shows you a brooch shaped like a serpent swallowing its tail, symbolizing eternal protection, but also a reminder of the thin line between safeguarding and danger. Food, too, was thought to be vulnerable. The tale goes that sharing a meal under the evil eye's influence could poison the spirit as surely as any meat gone bad. Some families would drop a pinch of salt or breadcrumbs around the table to ward off unwanted glances. You're reminded of the midwife's salt circles and nod thoughtfully. Clothing also played a part. bright colors, especially red and blue, were common in protective attire, while certain patterns, like the zigzag or lightning bolt, were stitched into garments to deflect harm. Some villagers believed that a tear or stain on their clothes was a sign that the evil eye had struck, but was repelled, a small victory in an ongoing battle. Historians still argue whether these beliefs reflected actual contamination fears or more symbolic ways to manage social tensions. Perhaps a torn garment was a visible sign of misfortune, making the invisible evil eye easier to pinpoint. One particularly quirky item you encounter is a tiny charm made from the teeth of a wolf, meant to intimidate the evil eye. The sharpness of the tooth symbolized strength and ferocity, a counter to envy's weakness. You chuckle at the idea of walking around with tiny wolf teeth jingling at your waist. But in this world, such objects were serious business. Later, you visit a healer who mixes herbal remedies and protective talismans. She tells you that objects imbued with the evil eye's curse could sometimes be cleansed by fire or water, rituals designed to wash away or burn off the malevolence. You watch as she dips a silver ring into a bowl of holy water, murmuring prayers while the metal gleams with renewed light. The boundaries between superstition, ritual, and everyday life blur seamlessly here. As night deepens, you hold a small amulet close, feeling the weight of centuries of belief nestled in your hand. Tomorrow, you'll explore how jealousy and envy, the human emotions behind the evil eye, were understood and expressed in medieval culture. For now, the village settles into quiet darkness, the objects around you seeming to pulse faintly with stories yet untold. The dawn stretches slow and hazy, the village wakened beneath a veil of soft mist. Today, you step beyond symbols and rituals to peer into the heart of the evil eye, the raw human emotions that fuel its terrifying power, jealousy and envy. You imagine yourself walking the narrow streets, overhearing gossip and sensing the silent undercurrents that stir suspicion and resentment among neighbors. In medieval times, envy was far more than a petty feeling. It was a force that could unravel lives and communities. You hear a blacksmith grumble about a rival's success, his words heavy with bitterness. Such envy, whispered the villagers, could summon the evil eye, a gaze that withered crops, sickened children, and twisted fortune. You discover that envy was often personified as a dark, creeping shadow, an internal demon gnawing at the soul. In some texts, it was described as a green-eyed monster, a phrase still haunting the English language today. The metaphor wasn't just poetic. It captured the insidious way jealousy infected relationships. You also learn of a curious medieval practice, the envy tongue. It was believed that some individuals could channel envy into a tangible force, almost like a weapon. This idea gave rise to suspicion and social policing. People kept watchful eyes on those rumored to possess such dangerous abilities. Historians still argue whether the evil eye stories primarily reflected real psychological fears or served as tools to enforce social norms, especially regarding wealth and success disparities. One particularly quirky detail you uncover is that some villages carried small mirrors or shiny coins, not just to reflect the evil eye, but as a way to distract envious thoughts. The idea was that the eye could be caught staring at its own reflection and thus become powerless. The emotional toll of envy also appeared in art and literature. Illuminated manuscripts depict sinister eyes lurking behind scenes of celebration or prosperity, suggesting that even joy was never free from the threat of envy. You recall earlier stories of Isolde and Thomas, their misfortunes likely rooted in these very human jealousies. You wander into a garden where herbs known to ward off envy, like rue and vervain, are growing. These plants were often worn or hung in homes to neutralize hostile feelings, blending nature's remedy with superstition. Later, a traveling minstrel sings a ballad about a wealthy lord undone by his own envy, his downfall a cautionary tale. You realize that envy's story was both a personal struggle and a community lesson. As dusk falls, you feel the weight of envy's quiet power, a force as old as humanity, as complex as any curse. Tomorrow's path will lead you into how communities tried to manage envy and the evil eye through laws, customs, and social rituals. For now, the village exhales into night, the green-eyed monster lurking just out of sight. You wake to a cool breeze stirring the trees, carrying with it the faint murmur of a bustling market. Today, your journey leads you into the practical side of medieval life, how entire communities tried to contain the threat of the evil eye and its jealous roots through laws, customs, and rituals. You imagine yourself sitting among village elders as they debate measures to keep envy and its dark consequences at bay. Medieval towns often passed explicit rules against boasting or flaunting wealth, a way to curb envy before it sparked the evil eye's curse. You overhear a town crier announcing a new ordinance forbidding ostentatious displays during festivals. The message is clear. Modesty isn't just polite, it's protective. You also learn about rituals performed in public spaces to neutralize collective envy. In some villages, a yearly cleansing ceremony involved processions with holy water sprinkled around the boundaries, symbolic gestures meant to wash away any accumulated malice. Historians still argue whether such laws and customs genuinely reduced social tension or merely served to control the lower classes by restricting their expression. You watch a group of women weaving protection bands from colored threads, red, blue, and white, meant to be tied around wrists or door handles. These bands were believed to form an invisible barrier against the evil eye, a simple yet powerful communal defense. Interestingly, in some regions, accusing someone of casting the evil eye could have serious consequences, legal or otherwise. You discover cases where people were fined or ostracized based on suspicion alone, showing how fear and superstition intertwined with justice. The social function of evil eye beliefs becomes clearer. By identifying a culprit, communities could channel anxiety and restore order, though sometimes at the expense of innocent victims. You overhear a storyteller weaving a tale about a village healed after burning a cursed effigy, a symbolic act of purging the evil eye's influence. One quirky custom you stumble upon involves hanging red chili peppers or garlic clusters at doorways, believed to sting or repel the curse. You chuckle imagining these pungent guardians as fiery bouncers standing watch, You recall how earlier you encountered similar protections in jewelry and clothing, recognizing the many layers of medieval defense. As evening draws near, you witness a gathering where villagers exchange whispered warnings and tips for spotting the evil eye, narrowed eyes, sudden chills, even unexplained misfortunes. These customs formed a social safety net, binding people through shared belief and mutual protection. Tomorrow, you'll explore the fascinating role of animals in Evil Eye folklore, both as victims and protectors. For now, the village settles beneath a sky freckled with stars, the night alive with silent watchfulness. The morning light filters softly through ancient oaks as you prepare to delve into a fascinating chapter of Evil Eye folklore, the role of animals. You wander through fields and stables, keen to uncover how creatures were both vulnerable to and guardians against the sinister gaze. Animals were thought to be especially susceptible to the evil eye's harm. Livestock falling ill or dying suddenly were often blamed on jealous neighbors or witches' curses. You meet a farmer mourning a cow struck down overnight, certain that an unseen gaze caused the creature's demise. The vulnerability of animals underscores the interconnectedness of medieval rural life. The loss of a single beast could spell disaster for a family's livelihood. Yet, animals also held protective power. Black cats, owls, and ravens were sometimes believed to carry the power to see and deflect the evil eye. The medieval world viewed these creatures with a mix of fear and respect, their mysterious behavior fueling legends of guardianship. Historians still argue whether these animal beliefs were based more on superstition or practical observation of animal behavior. You discover curious talismans made from animal parts, feathers, teeth, claws, worn or hung in homes to protect against envy's sting. One villager shows you a bracelet woven with raven feathers, claiming it keeps the evil eye at bay. You also hear of eye stones, polished gems, believed to mimic the protective gaze of certain animals. These stones were treasured for their supposed ability to confuse or repel malevolent looks. In some regions, animals like dogs were trained or symbolically assigned as watchers to guard households from envy and harm. You picture a faithful hound on watch, eyes alert for unseen threats. A quirky tale from a neighboring village tells of a rooster whose crow was said to break the evil eye's spell, signaling the return of safety and light. You smile at the idea of such a humble bird holding such power. You recall earlier stories where the evil eye's influence extended to crops and children, and now see how animals fit into this web of vulnerability and protection. As dusk falls, you sit by a flickering fire, the soft crackle blending with distant animal calls. You hold a small amulet adorned with a carved wolf's tooth, feeling the ancient presence of guardianship. Tomorrow, you'll venture into the fascinating subject of amulets and talismans, their designs, materials, and rituals. For now, the animals settle, and the village drifts into calm under a moonlit sky. You wake to a pale morning, dew still fresh on the grass as you prepare to delve deeper into the heart of medieval protection. Amulets and talismans designed to guard against the evil eye's curse. You imagine yourself wandering through bustling markets and shadowed workshops where artisans craft tiny, powerful objects from metal, stone, and bone. These amulets came in many shapes and sizes, some simple, some elaborately decorated, each carrying a unique protective charge. You hold a small pendant shaped like an eye, its blue glass shimmering faintly in the morning light. Known widely as the evil eye bead, this talisman was meant to catch or deflect the gaze before it could harm the wearer. You learn that the materials used mattered greatly. Silver was prized for purity, coral for vitality, and iron for strength. Each element carried symbolic meaning, enhancing the object's power. Historians still argue whether the designs were originally imported from Mediterranean cultures or evolved independently in Northern Europe. Showing the fluidity of medieval belief systems, one particularly quirky talisman you encounter is a tiny, intricately carved hand known as the Hand of Miriam, or Hamza, believed to block the evil gaze. You find it fascinating how symbols traveled across cultures, adapting and merging over centuries. Crafting these protective charms wasn't just about skill, it was a ritual. Artisans often recited prayers or spells while making amulets, imbuing them with layers of meaning. You watch a craftsman dip a pendant in blessed water, the glinting metal catching the light like a beacon. You also come across eye stones, polished gems resembling an eye, carried or sewn into clothing for added defense. These stones were said to confuse the evil eye by reflecting its image back upon itself, a visual mirror trick much like the verbal charms you learned earlier. Some families passed down heirloom amulets, each carrying stories of survival and protection. You feel the weight of history in one such pendant, smooth from centuries of touch. The market is alive with debate. Some believe mass-produced charms lose their potency, while others insist faith is what truly empowers the talisman. You chuckle quietly, imagining a medieval version of a customer review. 5 stars, keeps envy at bay, would buy again. Later, a healer invites you to witness the final step in an amulet's creation, consecration. She sprinkles holy water and murmurs prayers, sealing the charm's protective power. You notice how this blend of religious ritual and folk magic blurs any neat lines between official doctrine and popular belief. As dust settles, you tuck a small charm into your cloak pocket, feeling a subtle comfort. Tomorrow's journey will reveal how the evil eye influenced daily routines, from diet to dress. For now, the quiet hum of the village night envelops you. The talismans shimmer a small beacon in the dark. The day unfolds gently, soft light spilling over cobblestones and thatched roofs as you continue exploring how the evil eye shaped the rhythms of daily life, how it affected what people ate, wore, and how they behaved in public. You picture yourself moving through homes and markets, absorbing the subtle ways this belief wove into the mundane. Food was a surprisingly potent arena for protection. You watch a mother sprinkle salt on her children's plates, a simple act believed to neutralize any envy lurking unseen. Salt, with its preservative and purifying properties, was more than seasoning. It was a shield. Certain foods were avoided during vulnerable times. For instance, sharing bread or milk with strangers was often discouraged, lest you unknowingly invite the evil eye into your home through their gaze or envy. You see how communal meals, so vital in village life, carried a quiet tension beneath the surface. Historians still argue whether such taboos were rooted more in hygiene concerns or in managing social relationships and envy. Clothing was equally important. Bright colors, especially red and blue, were woven into garments to act as protective barriers, while some patterns were believed to deflect harmful looks. You spot a weaver carefully adding a zigzag motif to a cloak, a visual lightning bolt to strike down the curse. You also notice the widespread use of veils and head coverings, thought to conceal one's expression and thus protect the wearer from envious eyes. Some nobles even used elaborate masks or jewelry as both status symbols and charms. The behavioral codes you observe are subtle but pervasive. People avert their gaze when passing certain individuals, particularly those rumored to carry envy or the evil eye. You notice children being taught early to say protective phrases like, "God bless you," after a sneeze, a verbal shield against the curse. One quirky detail is the practice of touching wood or crossing fingers when discussing good fortune, gestures still familiar today, meant to lock in luck and prevent the evil eye from spoiling it. You reflect on the social balancing act these customs maintained, expressing joy or success carefully to avoid provoking envy, yet not hiding away entirely. Later, a merchant confides in you about a special dye believed to repel the evil eye when worn, a secret blend of herbs and minerals passed down through generations. As night descends, you pause before a mirror, remembering the talismans and mirrors used to deflect the curse, feeling the invisible threads of belief wrap around you like a cloak. Tomorrow's exploration will take you inside medieval religious practices and prayers specifically crafted against the evil eye. For now, the village exhales into the dark, its rhythms steady beneath the watchful eyes, real or imagined, of all who dwell there. You awaken to the faint glow of candlelight filtering through stained glass, the soft murmur of monks chanting in a distant chapel. Today, your journey leads you deep into the spiritual defenses against the evil eye. Prayers, blessings, and holy rites designed to shield the faithful from harm. You picture yourself kneeling alongside medieval worshippers, feeling the cool stone beneath your hands and the solemn weight of centuries-old faith. Medieval religious practice often intertwined tightly with folk belief, blending official church prayers with local rituals. Priests recited special blessings, invoking saints known for protection against envy and malice. Like Saint Benedict and Saint Christopher, their names whispered like talismans themselves. You learn that the sign of the cross was not just a symbol, but an active gesture believed to break the evil eye's hold. People traced the cross over their children, livestock, and homes, infusing them with divine protection. Historians still argue how much the Church officially endorsed these practices versus tolerated or even suppressed some folk elements. The line between orthodox prayer and superstition was often blurry. One particularly intriguing detail is the use of exorcism prayers, or minor exorcisms, aimed specifically at removing the evil eye's influence. Lesser rituals performed by a local clergy. Not full exorcisms, but potent enough to calm fears. You also discover that some medieval manuscripts included protective spells and prayers tucked into margins or written on amulets, reflecting a grassroots blending of sacred and folk traditions. The use of holy water played a central role. Sprinkling it around houses or over people was believed to cleanse envy's shadow, turning a home into a sanctuary against harmful gazes. You recall the village cleansing ceremonies from earlier and see how the church's rituals and folk customs often overlapped in practice, if not always in official sanction. A quirky example you find is the blessing of the eyes performed during certain festivals, where clergy blessed people's eyesight, protecting them from envy and harmful glances, a charming mix of humor and piety. As the day fades, you feel the calming presence of faith's armor, a spiritual balm against the anxious world beyond the chapel doors. Tomorrow, your path will lead to how literature and art depicted the evil eye, shaping popular imagination. For now, the flicker of candlelight casts long shadows, and the sacred chants wrap around you like a protective shawl. A gray dawn breaks gently as you step into the world of medieval art and literature, where the evil eye's dark presence is both feared and vividly imagined. You find yourself wandering through dusty libraries and shadowed chapels, surrounded by illuminated manuscripts, frescoes, and stained glass that capture the many faces of envy's curse. Visual depictions often showed the evil eye as a literal eye, sometimes surrounded by flames or emitting beams, a tangible force capable of striking from afar. You trace the intricate lines of a manuscript illustration where a jealous woman's gaze causes a wilted plant to shrivel, a powerful metaphor for envy's destructive reach. Literature of the time frequently featured the evil eye in moral tales, warning against jealousy. Characters cursed or saved by the gaze often embodied larger lessons about humility, pride, and social harmony. You imagine yourself reading aloud a cautionary story where a proud knight's downfall is traced to a rival's envious look. Historians still argue how much these artistic and literary portrayals shaped popular beliefs versus merely reflecting them. Did artists amplify fears or provide a channel to understand them? One quirky tidbit is the appearance of the evil eye motif in architectural details, carved into doorways or on fountains, as a decorative but protective element. You smile imagining medieval architects moonlighting as spiritual bodyguards. You notice how the eye motif evolved stylistically, sometimes realistic, sometimes abstract, always charged with symbolic meaning. In some cases, the evil eye was paired with mythical creatures or Christian symbols to emphasize divine protection. An interesting fringe aspect involves apotropaic devices, objects designed to avert evil that artists cleverly incorporated into everyday items, from belt buckles to pottery, blending utility with superstition. You also discover medieval plays where the evil eye serves as a plot device, bringing tension and humor as characters scramble to avoid or lift the curse. You pause by a stained glass window, light refracting through colored glass, and see the eye motif sparkling back at you, a timeless reminder of humanity's complex dance with envy. Tomorrow, you'll explore the legacy of the evil eye, how this ancient fear echoes in modern culture, superstition, and psychology. For now, the library's quiet envelopes you, the shadows of ink and parchment whispering old truths. The morning light spills softly as you turn your thoughts to the enduring legacy of the evil eye, how this ancient dread stretches beyond medieval villages into the modern world. hidden beneath layers of culture, superstition, and psychology. You wander through contemporary streets and social rituals, sensing the subtle echoes of a curse that never fully disappeared. In many cultures today, talismans like the blue evil eye beads continue to be worn, hung in homes, or gifted to loved ones, tiny charms bridging centuries of human worry over envy and harm. You notice tourists snapping photos of these charms in bustling markets, their allure both exotic and familiar. Modern psychology offers a fascinating perspective. The evil eye may be seen as a cultural expression of envy's universal power, a way to cope with feelings of vulnerability and social tension. Some psychologists argue that the belief functions as a social mechanism, warning against overt displays of success or provoking jealousy. Historians still argue whether modern superstitions about the evil eye directly descend from medieval fears, or if they are a global phenomenon with multiple independent origins. You learn quirky modern practices. In some places, people spit 3 times or make a quick fig sign gesture to ward off bad luck, a subtle nod to ancient protective acts. Social media today sometimes mirrors old fears, with shade throwing and cancel culture resembling metaphorical evil eyes cast across the digital landscape, causing real emotional harm. You chuckle thinking about how a medieval villager might react to online envy wars, probably invoking a strong prayer or clutching their amulet tighter. You also explore how artists and writers continue to draw on evil eye imagery, from fashion trends to films, showing its lasting grip on imagination. You visit a cultural festival celebrating protective charms, where old and new blend in colorful rituals, reminding you how these beliefs adapt but persist. As the sun sets, you reflect on the powerful human need to explain misfortune and envy, and how the evil eye remains a symbol of that timeless struggle. Tomorrow, the final step awaits, a gentle wind down to close this long journey, soothing away shadows with calm and quiet. For now, you settle into a soft chair, the pulse of past and present entwined like a whispered lullaby. The night deepens around you, a soft blanket of stillness settling over the world as you prepare to close this long and winding journey through the shadowy whispers of the evil eye. The stories, the fears, the rituals, they now blend into a gentle murmur at the edge of your mind, like the last flicker of candlelight before the flame dies. You feel the slow, steady rhythm of your breath, the comforting weight of history folding softly into the present. The once disturbing power of the evil eye has transformed into a quiet understanding, an ancient expression of human vulnerability, envy, and the deep desire to protect what is precious. As you drift toward rest, imagine the talismans laid carefully beside your pillow, the whispered prayers softly echoing through the night air, and the protective eyes watching over you, not as curses, but as guardians born from centuries of hope and caution. The fear that once haunted medieval minds now feels distant, like a shadow fading at dawn. You are wrapped in calm. The uneasy glances replaced by a knowing smile, the anxious heartbeat slowed to a gentle pulse. Tomorrow holds no curse, only the soft unfolding of new light and peace. So, as you sink into the quiet comfort of sleep, let the lingering stories of envy and protection ease away, leaving only the warmth of shared human stories and the promise of another peaceful night. Rest easy, knowing that in the tapestry of history, even the darkest threads shine with meaning, and you have walked through them with open eyes and a calm heart.